Many history books once painted Native Americans as primitive, a myth as flimsy as Columbus's navigation skills. While Europeans slapped labels like uncivilized on indigenous cultures, they were quietly borrowing survival hacks, medical breakthroughs, and engineering marvels that kept their own empires afloat. However, the so-called New World wasn't discovered, it was schooled. Turns out, backward societies were out here rewriting the rules of science, architecture, and sustainability while Europe fumbled with leeches and feudalism. In this video, we're time traveling to uncover advanced tech that shook colonizers low-key. We will be discussing some ancient Native American technologies that were ahead of their time. Anesthetics and painkillers. Let's time travel for a second. Imagine you're in the Americas, circa 1200 CE. You've got a gnarly headache, a broken bone, or a hole drilled into your skull. No sterile tools, no IV drips, no anesthesiologist cracking jokes as you drift off. But guess what? You're in great hands. Long before modern medicine slapped a label on anesthesia, indigenous healers were out here turning forests into pharmacies and performing surgeries that would make even Grey's Anatomy interns sweat. Let's start with the OG painkiller, willow bark. Picture a Cherokee healer in the smoky light of dawn, brewing a bitter tea from stripped bark. Fast forward 800 years, and you've got your grandma popping aspirin tablets. Coincidence? Nope. Willow bark is packed with salicin, which converts to salicylic acid in your body, the same stuff Bayer tweaked in 1897 to create aspirin. Tribes like the Blackfoot and Cherokee didn't need a pharmacy degree to figure this out. They chewed the bark raw, steeped it into teas, or pounded it into poultices to tackle everything from fevers to sore muscles. It doubled as an anti-inflammatory. Fun fact, Europeans initially dismissed these remedies as primitive until they started dying of malaria. Guess who saved their butts? Quinine from the Andes, another indigenous discovery. Oops. Now let's head south to the Inca Empire. You're about to get a tooth pulled, or worse, part of your skull removed. More on that later. But instead of panicking, your surgeon hands you a wad of coca leaves to chew. Suddenly, your mouth goes numb, your pain fades, and you're weirdly chill about the whole drilling into bone thing. Coca leaves weren't just a caffeine-like pick-me-up. Inca healers knew their secret sauce. Alkaloids like cocaine. Yes, that cocaine. These compounds block nerve signals, acting like ancient lidocaine. Modern studies confirm it. Coca leaves numb tissue so well that it's still used in some Andean villages today. Before tobacco became a CVS aisle of carcinogens, native healers were using it as medicine. Forget vaping. Think wound care. Tribes like the Algonquin applied tobacco poultices to numb burns, bites, and cuts. Others blended it with herbs for pain relief smokes. No, not that kind. Think more medicinal joint. In the Amazon, shamans still use wild tobacco, mapacho, in rituals to purge toxins and see illnesses. Sure, it's not FDA approved, but you get creative when your pharmacy is a rainforest. Speaking of skulls, let's discuss everyone's favorite nightmare fuel, trepanation. Ancient Peruvians didn't just survive this practice, they excelled at it. Using obsidian blades or bronze tools, healers would scrape or drill holes into the skull to treat seizures, headaches, or, probably, demonic possession. How do we know it worked? Mummies, lots of them. Skulls show bone regrowth, meaning patients lived years after their brain DIY. Meanwhile, 19th century surgeons were still using dirty tools and zero anesthesia. Apartment blocks. Hold up. Skyscrapers didn't start with New York or Dubai. Let's rewind to the American Southwest, where ancient architects stacked pueblos like Lego sets centuries before elevators existed. Forget tiny homes. These guys invented sustainable high-rises with a view. Imagine a housing complex so epic it's carved into a cliff. Meet Mesa Verde, Colorado's star attraction. Built between 1150 and 1300 CE, this wasn't just a village. It was a 150-room, multi-story fortress with apartments, granaries, and kivas, ceremonial pits. Think Bronx tenement meets Grand Canyon. Why cliffs? Defense. Enemies can't raid you if they need rock climbing gear. Plus, the stone acted as natural insulation, warm in winter and cool in summer. Oh, and the south-facing cliffs? Free solar heating. Take notes, modern engineers. Now zoom into New Mexico's desert, where the ancestral Puebloans built Chaco Canyon, a sprawling metropolis of stone apartment blocks. Pueblo Bonito, the crown jewel, had 600-plus rooms stacked 4 stories high, taller than most Brooklyn brownstones. They aligned entire buildings with lunar cycles and solstices. Windows and doors framed the sun on key dates, turning architecture into a celestial calendar. Plus, their drainage systems handled desert monsoons like a boss. EcoFlex. They used local sandstone, recycled timbers, adobe, zero concrete, and zero carbon footprint. Suck it, urban sprawl. Meanwhile, in Peru, the Incas were playing Jenga with granite. Machu Picchu's terraced apartments were built with stones so precisely cut that you couldn't slip a credit card between them. There was no mortar, no glue, just flawless geometry and anti-earthquake engineering. How did they do it? Theories range from aliens to really patient sanding. Reality, trial, error, and generational skill. These homes didn't just survive earthquakes, they absorbed them. Bulletproof vests. When you hear bulletproof vest, you probably think of modern Kevlar. But you're way off if you think body armor is a recent invention. Long before modern ballistic vests, the Aztecs and Maya had their own version, so effective that even Spanish conquistadors swapped their steel armor for it. The Ichcahuipili was a quilted cotton vest that could stop arrows, obsidian blades, and even early gunfire. Sounds ridiculous. How could cotton possibly outperform metal? Well, let's break it down. The Aztecs didn't just throw on some thick cotton and hope for the best. They had a method. They layered unspun cotton, soaked it in salt brine, and let it dry until it became stiff and shock-absorbent. This wasn't just some makeshift padding. It was battlefield-proven armor. Spanish chroniclers noted that Aztec cotton armor was surprisingly durable. Unlike heavy steel armor, which turned into an oven under the blistering Mexican sun, Ichcahuipili was breathable, lightweight, and still provided serious protection. In fact, conquistadors like Hernán Cortés and his men ditched their steel breastplates to favor the Aztec design because it was more practical. So, did it really stop bullets? Yes, and here's why. Early firearms, like the arquebuses the Spanish carried, weren't as powerful as modern guns. Their bullets were slow-moving compared to today's standards, meaning thick layers of hardened cotton could absorb the impact and prevent penetration. And it wasn't just the Aztecs. The Maya had their own version of cotton armor, often reinforced with animal hides. This armor was so effective that Spanish soldiers facing indigenous forces in the Yucatan found themselves struggling against warriors who were both mobile and well-protected. Painting techniques. Think ancient paintings are all faded and dull. Then you haven't seen the Maya murals. These guys had a secret weapon. Maya blue, a color so durable that it's still vibrant after more than 1,000 years. While European frescoes from the same era crumbled and lost color, Maya temples, ceramics, and codices remained astonishingly bright. And here's the wild part. Modern scientists still struggle to fully understand the Maya's mosaic so fully. What made Maya blue so special? It wasn't just regular pigment. It was a genius fusion of organic and mineral chemistry. The Maya mixed indigo, a natural dye from the indigofera plant, with palygorskite, a rare clay mineral in Central America. Then they heated the mixture, fusing the pigment into the clay structure, which locked the color in place. The result? A paint that resisted sun, rain, and even chemical erosion. Archaeologists have found murals and ceramics dating back to 800 AD that still look as vivid as the day they were painted. But Maya blue wasn't the only trick Mesoamerican artists had up their sleeves. Over in Teotihuacan, artists developed a technique that made their murals appear almost three-dimensional. Instead of just painting on stone, they plastered walls with a limestone-based layer before applying mineral-based pigments. This method created a richer, more vibrant color effect. Some murals even had a glossy finish, achieved by polishing the surface after painting. These murals weren't just for decoration. They told stories, epic scenes of gods, warriors, and daily life, giving us a window into a civilization that thrived centuries before the Spanish conquest. And here's something you might not expect. Mesoamerican painting techniques weren't limited to walls. They painted pottery, codices, their version of books, and even their own bodies. Some pigments were made from crushed minerals, while others came from plants and insects. Certain colors had deep spiritual significance. Red symbolized blood and sacrifice, blue was linked to the gods, and black was often associated with war and death. These weren't just random colors, but were carefully chosen to convey meaning. Modern scientists studying Maya blue have tried to replicate it, but even with today's technology, they haven't nailed it perfectly. That's a testament to how advanced the Maya were in chemistry and materials science. Suspension bridges. When the Spanish arrived in South America, they expected to find primitive civilizations. Instead, they stumbled upon an empire with engineering skills that Europe wouldn't perfect for centuries. Case in point, the Inca suspension bridges. These weren't just some flimsy rope crossings swaying dangerously over rivers. These fully functional, durable bridges could support soldiers, traders, and even herds of llamas carrying supplies across deep canyons and raging rivers. And the best part? The Incas built them without iron, steel, or even wheels. So how did they do it? The secret weapon was grass, a hardy plant in the high Andes. When woven together, this grass became incredibly strong, so strong that thick braids could support thousands of pounds. The Incas used this to create massive cables, anchoring them to stone pillars on either side of a gorge. Every year, communities gather to rebuild bridges, a process that has survived for centuries. The most famous example is the Keswashaka Bridge, which is still reconstructed annually using the same ancient techniques. Even today, it remains a fully functional bridge that locals cross on foot. This isn't just for cultural preservation. It works, and it works well. Here's where things get really impressive. These Inca bridges weren't just effective, but superior to the rigid stone bridges used in Europe. Why? Earthquakes. Andean South America is one of the most seismically active regions in the world. While stone bridges would crack and collapse under seismic stress, Inca suspension bridges absorbed the shock. Their flexible design allowed them to move with the earth rather than against it, making them far more resilient. Umbrellas. When you think of umbrellas, you probably imagine Victorian ladies strolling through gardens with lace parasols or ancient Chinese designs made of paper and bamboo. But you might not know that the Maya had their own version of the umbrella long before it became a global trend. Forget flimsy paper parasols. The Maya built palapas, sturdy, waterproof canopies crafted from woven palm leaves and wooden frames. These weren't just casual sunshades. They were symbols of power. Maya rulers and elite figures were often depicted in artwork holding massive sunshades, carried by attendants like royal accessories. If you were important, you didn't just walk around in the sun like everyone else. Someone held an umbrella over you. In Maya society, the more elaborate your sunshade, the more powerful you were. It wasn't just about staying cool. It was about showing the world that you were important enough to be shielded from the elements at all times. And they weren't the only ones using advanced shade technology. The Aztecs and Incas also had shaded terraces, covered walkways, and cooling structures to keep people comfortable in extreme heat. But the Maya didn't stop at umbrellas. They designed entire cities to stay cool. Their temples, palaces, and homes were built with angled walls, high ceilings, and strategic ventilation, creating natural airflow that reduced indoor temperatures. This meant that while medieval Europeans sweated in stone castles with tiny windows, the Maya enjoyed breezy, well-ventilated buildings. Their knowledge of shade, airflow, and cooling systems was so advanced that modern architects still studied their designs, writing systems. When people think of ancient civilizations in the Americas, they often picture towering pyramids, elaborate temples, and the legendary rubber ball game played by the Maya. But what often gets overlooked is something just as impressive as their writing systems. While many ancient cultures passed down history through oral traditions, civilizations like the Maya, Aztecs, and Inca took things a step further, developing their own recording methods. These weren't just simple drawings or crude carvings. They were fully functional, highly advanced communication systems rivaling the scripts of Egypt, Mesopotamia, and China. The Maya didn't just develop a writing system. They created the most sophisticated script in the pre-Columbian Americas. Unlike simple pictograms, the Maya script was logosyllabic, combining symbols for entire words, logograms, with characters representing syllables, phonetic glyphs. This allowed them to write simple records in complex texts filled with historical accounts, mythology, laws, poetry, and even personal names. Maya scribes weren't just chiseling their work into stone either. They wrote on codices, books from bark paper, folded like modern-day accordions. These codices contained detailed astronomical charts, rituals, and daily life records. Unfortunately, most of these books were destroyed by Spanish conquerors, who deemed them works of the devil. Today, only 4 surviving Maya codices exist, each offering a rare glimpse into the intellectual achievements of this ancient civilization. The Aztecs also had a writing system, though it was more pictographic. Instead of phonetic symbols like the Maya, they recorded information using images, symbols, and numeric signs. Their codices served as tax records, law books, and even history books, documenting everything from royal genealogies to battle strategies. These codices weren't just functional, they were artistic masterpieces. Vivid, colorful illustrations covered the pages, making them an early version of what we call graphic novels today. Sadly, like the Maya's books, many Aztec codices were destroyed during the Spanish conquest. However, A few survived and remain key sources for understanding Aztec civilization. Unlike the Maya and Aztecs, the Inca didn't use paper or pictographs. Instead, they developed the quipu, a system of knotted strings that acted as an advanced record-keeping tool. Each quipu consisted of strings of different colors, lengths, and knot patterns, encoding vast amounts of information, from census data to food supplies and military logistics. While most scholars believe quipus were primarily used for numbers and accounting, some experts suggest they also conveyed more complex messages, possibly even a form of writing. If true, this would make the Inca the only known civilization to use a fiber-based communication system instead of traditional ink and paper. So, while much of the world still relied on oral tradition, the Maya, Aztecs, and Incas had already developed writing methods that put them on par with some of the greatest civilizations in history. Astronomy. When ancient civilizations gazed at the night sky, they did more than admire the stars. They also mapped the heavens with astonishing precision. From predicting eclipses to designing cities based on celestial alignments, civilizations like the Maya, Inca, and the Chaco Canyon, peoples of North America, tracked the movements of the stars and planets long before telescopes existed. The Maya didn't just have one calendar, they had three. Their calendar system was so advanced that it could accurately predict solar eclipses, planetary movements, and even changes in agricultural cycles. The Tzolk'in, 260-day sacred calendar, is used for religious and ceremonial purposes. The Hab, 365-day solar calendar, used for agricultural planning. Their observations of Venus were particularly impressive. The Maya knew that Venus had a cycle of 584 days, and they carefully tracked its movements, timing important events, like wars and rituals, around its position in the sky. El Castillo in Chichen Itza is one of the most famous examples of Maya astronomy. This massive pyramid wasn't just a temple, but an astronomical marker. During the spring and autumn equinoxes, the setting sun creates the illusion of a serpent slithering down the pyramid's staircase. This phenomenon wasn't accidental. The entire structure was built with precise astronomical calculations, proving that the Maya were not just builders, but celestial engineers. The Chaco Canyon people, who lived in what is now the U.S. Southwest, also had their own way of tracking celestial events. At Fajada Butte, a series of rock slabs create a pattern of light and shadow, known as the sun dagger. This natural clock, an ancient observatory carved into stone, marks the solstices and equinoxes with pinpoint accuracy. The Inca capital of Cusco was designed as a massive solar observatory. Temples, streets, and plazas were aligned with celestial events, ensuring that agriculture, religious festivals, and even military campaigns followed the sun's and stars' cycles. Electroplating. When you think of electroplating, you probably picture high-tech labs and 19th-century inventors. But long before modern chemistry, the ancient Moche civilization of Peru had already figured out how to coat copper with gold, creating objects that looked like solid gold but used only a thin layer of the precious metal. The Moche, 100 to 800 CE, didn't have electricity, so how did they plate metals? Instead of electroplating with currents, they used a chemical process involving acidic plant extracts. Dissolving gold in acidic solutions could create a thin layer of gold particles, which bonded to copper surfaces. Once polished, the result was indistinguishable from solid gold. This technique allowed them to make extravagant-looking artifacts while conserving valuable gold supplies. The Inca took metalworking even further with tumbaga, a blend of gold and copper. Depending on how much heat they applied, they could make the metal softer or harder, allowing them to craft everything from intricate jewelry to ceremonial knives and armor. This alloy was so advanced that the Spanish were initially fooled, thinking they discovered pure gold treasures. Imagine their surprise when they tried to melt down these objects, only to realize they contained more copper than expected. So, while European alchemists were still dreaming about turning lead into gold, the Moche and Inca had already mastered metal manipulation techniques that modern scientists still study today. Freeze drying. The Incas didn't have refrigerators, but they had something even better, a natural freeze drying process that kept food edible for years. It wasn't magic, and it definitely wasn't luck. It was a carefully honed survival technology that helped sustain one of the greatest empires in history. The secret? Chuno is a preserved potato that could last for decades without spoiling. The process was so genius that modern scientists still study it today. Here's how it worked. At high altitudes in the Andes, nighttime temperatures drop below freezing. The Inca laid out freshly harvested potatoes on the ground and let the frost do its thing. The next morning, the potatoes were trampled underfoot, not for fun, but to squeeze out moisture. Over several days of freezing at night and sun-drying during the day, the potatoes lost almost all their water content, leaving behind a light, rock-hard food source that could be stored for years. This wasn't just a backup snack. Chuno became a key part of the Incan military strategy. Soldiers on long campaigns carried lightweight, durable food that didn't require cooking or refrigeration. In times of famine, stored Chuno kept entire villages alive. And it wasn't just potatoes. The Inca also preserved meat using a similar technique, creating Cherokee, the ancestor of modern-day jerky. By combining high-altitude freezing with sun-drying, they developed a protein-rich food that could last months without spoiling. Today, NASA freeze-dries astronaut food using almost the same principle. And suppose you've ever eaten instant coffee, powdered soup, or camping rations. In that case, you've used a version of this Incan survival hack without realizing it. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe. See you in our next video.